Um, sure. All right, Peter, you are all set.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Going to convene in open session via Zoom this meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, September 26, 2023. Call this meeting to order. What am I looking for here? So, all right, script for remotely conducted open meetings. Good morning. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening by video conference pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise stated. This meeting is being recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation. Man, I always trip over that word. Unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Use the raise hand feature in Zoom to indicate that you'd like to offer a comment. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order that they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Leah Hill, and request that they be read into the meeting record. Her email is lhill@nantucket.ma.gov. I am Peter Brace, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Okay. Doug Rose.
Aye.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Rachel Freeman.
Here.
Sarah Boyce.
Here.
Christy Kickham.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here. Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Leah Hill.
Here.
Vince Murphy.
Here.
Florencia Rulo.
Here.
Haley Cook.
Here.
Jeff Carlson.
Here.
Great. Okay. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay. Now, public comment. Is there any comments from the public on items not on this agenda? Seeing none, I'll again remind the public that we will take public comment.
Peter.
Hello?
RJ has his hand up. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, RJ, remember, not on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair Brace, and thank you, Leah. RJ Turcotte on behalf of the Nantucket Land and Water Council. I just am commenting in hopes that you've all had a chance to watch this past Thursday's meeting at the Conservation Commission on the regulatory updates, which include a lot of language from the Coastal Resilience Plan. They're the first town board who's looking to actually adopt and codify some of what's in the CRP. So I know there have been some past discussions about writing a letter of support, but I hope that this committee will consider revisiting that, because the commission could use some support in getting these regulatory updates finished, and they're really critical. Thank you.
Thanks, RJ. Do you know if there is something written down which I can distribute to our committee so that then we can actually see it and comment on it? Because there was a document that I distributed to everybody that highlighted the parts that would change, but that's as far as we went. So is there something now that's refined that then we can issue a comment on?
I think I know Jeff Carlson's on this call. He may be able to speak to having the latest draft available. Some of the things that were being discussed, such as buffer zones and 2-foot separation of groundwater, aren't necessarily pertinent to this committee. I think it would be perfectly within reason to comment on just the CRP language being adopted, which I don't know that that's going to change very much, or at least it wasn't discussed very much at the last meeting. So maybe Jeff can pass along the latest draft for you guys to review.
Thanks, RJ. Jeff, can you hook us up?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for it immediately, if you go on to the Conservation Commission's agendas and minutes page from the last Thursday's meeting, I think it was the 21st. There's a pack there that has both the red line version of the regulations and also it's pretty lengthy, but there's a change summary. And I can also just email it to Leah and she can send it around to the group too.
Yeah, the latter. That'd be great.
No problem.
All right, thank you. Okay. Any
Peter,
more?
before you go, it's Matt. What's
Matt.
the time frame? How soon is this required?
The time frame is when the commission feels it's ready. So I don't necessarily think that there's a big push to, have it done in the next couple weeks or when it's going to be. I know there's a lot of discussion going around now, especially as it relates to potential to changing buffer zones that may break it into kind of a phase 1 and phase 2, but the commission's trying to sort that out. But as soon as possible would be nice.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Matt, for the question. Jeff for the answer. So the next thing is reading and short discussion of the purpose, the charge of CRAC. I thought that now that we are, Mary got us to where we are now. Mary got us through the creation of the plan. Now this is the new phase of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. We are in essence transitioning to the implementation crew that will put things into motion. Things are already in motion. We had a presentation from Leah last week at the last meeting on the progress of projects, the near-term projects, and maybe I feel like we got a little lost in talking about committees and financing, and I just thought I would read our mission and read our purpose. I know you guys know where it is, but I just wanted to make sure that we're on the right track. So if you'll bear with me. The mission: the commission will work with the Coastal Resilience Coordinator in the development, oversight, and implementation of a coastal resilience plan for the town of Nantucket to address the impact of climate change and sea level rise. The plan shall address planning across the system-wide needs of the community and include social, cultural, and economic needs, infrastructure needs, and the needs of the natural environment. Preservation of historical landmarks shall be a component of the plan. Purpose: the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee was established by the Nantucket Select Board on April 24th, 2019. This committee works with the Coastal Resilience Coordinator to oversee and finalize the Coastal Resilience Plan by providing input as to plan modifications, updates, finalization, recommending priority of coastal resilience projects, including review of costs and funding sources, grant opportunities, professional services, next steps, action steps, additional resource needs, including the development of a team of scientific advisors, partnership opportunities. Assisting with identifying overlap, opportunities for coordination with other town plans, including hazard mitigation plan, harbor plan, parks master plan, open space and recreation plan, coastal management plan, stormwater management plan, and master plan. Assisting with obtaining community feedback, including ways to engage seasonal residents and ensure that all areas of the island are represented. Reviewing pertinent existing regulations to include coastal resilience accommodations, identify any disconnects between regulations and practice, and or conflicts and recommend ways to achieve alignment. Reviewing proposed pertinent regulations for coastal resilience purposes. Regularly reviewing information on sea level rise projections with regard to impact on the island. Review the activities of other coastal communities as related to coastal resilience planning projects. Provide regular updates to the select board and town administration. Other related tasks as may be requested by the board and or town administration. Okay. Does anybody have any comments? Okay, we're all good.
Peter, I do have
Jared.
one comment. One of the things that struck me at the last meeting that sounded to me like a little bit of a disconnect between Vince Murphy's view and my view of the responsibility of this committee for being involved in funding, grants, and those kind of issues. The language you just read indicated that it is, in fact, part of our overall mission to take some steps, or at least to spend some time looking at those funding opportunities and grants and things like that. So I didn't want there to be the impression that I initially got from Vince's comment last meeting was that, you know, we have nothing to say about the funding issues. And to me, they are extremely important going forward. And the language that you read indicates that, in fact, we do have a role to play with respect to those kind of issues. That's my comment.
Okay, Gary, thanks. And I agree. And our role is advisory. So we advise the select board.
Right.
And if possible, we advise the FinCom. But that's about as far as it goes for us.
Yep.
But I just felt it was important that we read everything. Also, that second one, and as well as, community feedback and engaging with seasonal residents, which we're working on, which to me, as a new chairman, that's in addition to seeing projects through and being supportive and following through on the rest of the purpose items. We're all about engaging with the public. So anyone else have a comment? Rachel, did you have your hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not.
Okay, Christy, go ahead.
No, Peter, I was just gonna add, I anticipate going forward in the future that we will also be giving advisement to Capital Committee as well. Once things, get significant and ramp up, I'm sure that's gonna be become rather a healthy relationship.
Yes, Christy, definitely. Sarah? Sarah Boyce?
Thanks. I just wanted to, through the chair, ask Matt as a representative from the select board if there are any additions or changes from the select board, since we are an advisory committee. And maybe this is putting you on the spot, but thinking if there's any changes that they should come through the select board too.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any changes. I think what he just read was fairly substantial. I think our mission is fairly broad, and I think the select board and the staff are looking for as much work as we're able to credit able to do, if we can do it well, so.
Okay, Doug?
Sorry, my electronic hand is not coming up, so I'm using my manual hand. Thank you, Peter. I just wanted to add to what Christy was saying, and Sarah as well. There is other language in the executive summary of the CRP that speaks to this whole issue about and being involved in funding. And so I think it's pretty well articulated in there, and there shouldn't be any real controversy around this. The other thing I wanted to just throw in there is that there's a way to think about an advisory committee as being sort of passive, meaning you sit and wait until you're asked for advice and then you chime in. And I think another way to think about advisory is to be proactively advisory. And I think there's a lot of us, I'm sensing a sentiment on the among my colleagues here that there's an eagerness to be proactive and to become advocates for putting Nantucket on a path, to really truly implement the CRP. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, Doug, I agree, and I think we already are active and not passive. We're not waiting for stuff to come at us by virtue of going after public outreach strategies. So that's just one thing. So I don't think we're passive at all. But anyway, okay, so we're gonna have a brief discussion with the town's communications office. And that is Florencia Rulo and Haley Cook. And we don't have a time for a big presentation, but they might give us a general idea of what we could do for an outreach plan, and then help us work it out over the next several months. So Florencia and Haley, if you want to just take it away.
Hi, sure. Florencia Rulo, Communications Manager for the town. I don't think that we're going to present here a strategy for CRAG to have an outreach plan, but I think that we can tell you that we are the communications office for the town, and we have tools that might help you in your outreach process. But it is important for us first to understand what is that you're trying to communicate and to have an idea of times. So we assist different departments within the town and initiatives and projects, and we have tools. We manage the website. We have a platform that helps us create projects and initiatives and merge them with surveys, public boards, sign up forms so people can stay notified with whatever it is that CRAG, for example, wants to communicate. We have mass emailing system. We manage the town's social media. I am a graphic designer and videographer, so always happy to put graphic content, video content together. But I think that it is important for you all to identify first what is the big message and scale down from there. And also identify expectations, groups that you want to reach out to. We will need direction from you on that. When it comes to tools, we have different tools to reach out to the community in different ways. We are in contact with NCTV. We have communications with the media as well. We can put together press releases. Communication can go out in various formats. We just need, I guess, ideas. First, we'll need you all to be very familiar with the presence that you have right now on the website. And through Leah and Vince and Jeff, of course, we can communicate more on that. But I think that that's a little bit of what we wanted to let you know regarding expectations and things that we can definitely accomplish. And if there's something that we cannot do, we can find ways of getting it done through third parties.
Okay, Florencia, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we would need to get a handle on what our outreach plan is going to be before we bring it to you, and then you'll help us say, no, you can't do that, or this is great, or you'll help us modify it and say what we want to say to the community. Correct? Yeah.
More than the outreach plan, I think that, well, I guess my question will be for you to tell us what is, when you say outreach plan, what is that you would like the community to know? So maybe just present these as questions to the group. What is that you feel that the community right now needs to know but doesn't, and then we can outline a plan of how to bring this to the community through different channels. But is it the work of the group that you would like the community to know better? Yeah, I mean, is it initiatives that you have coming up in the future? Do you want educational material like the homeowners brochure that we put a couple years ago? Do you want more of that? If you want more of that, I think that's great material. Can
All
you
of them.
identify a couple topics so we will ask you for the big picture, and then we can just bring it down into more digestible material for the community and for the different communities within the island. So think about maybe translating into Portuguese and Spanish, and that's something that we can do. But I think that our question first is, what is that you can give us so we can digest and see how we can present it to the community, and at what pace too. When
Okay,
you say outreach, do you think that, yeah, I think those are some of the questions that we have before we can start working on an outreach plan long term, because it has different phases. Of course, you need a presence in social media. Natural Resources has social media. We do an amazing job, but the town will be very happy also to populate this content because it is important information for anyone that lives on Nantucket. So social media is one aspect. Then you have material that we can produce in some way that it can attract to the media. Then we can work on videos, maybe long term. We can work on surveys. We do have two survey platforms that we use depending on the need. If you need to sign up for, I don't know, if you need a form to fill out your information, we might do it in Typeform. We have Engage and SendCity. For those that are not familiar, this is a new platform that the town has, very similar to the website, that has different features. Nantucket-ma.gov/engage. It's on the website. But then again, it lets you create surveys there, discussion topics. So you have a question, you wonder if you might want to start asking the community what is that they know. You can have this discussion topic. Instead of going on Facebook, you keep it in this page where people can access information at the same time that they ask questions. We can, I don't want to take all the time here, but we have different features that we can use. So I guess that Haley, you can interrupt at any time. But what we will first, we think that this is definitely a very important topic that will stay for the long term. So we do see a need of increasing outreach and having educational material that can be supported maybe in the future with public forums or, more other idea that I just got later that I just need to confirm. But the presence of the board in meeting the public face to face too can be important. But for that, it'll be very useful to have handouts, brochures, but also, yes, digital content. Where I think that we can start is maybe at a future meeting, the board can discuss what are some of the most important topics you can think of, and then we can start scaling down from there. And what we also find very useful, if you see a community that is doing great outreach, just share it with us so we can start brainstorming ideas as well. If you see a nonprofit, anything, any website, anything that you like in social media, share it with us so we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to communicating all the time. Much of the material is already out there. We just need to adjust it to Nantucket. So yeah, that would be my advice. Maybe meet at a future meeting, come up with a couple topics, bring us in, and we can start discussing. But we like directions. We like you to tell us what is
Sure.
it you expect, and we can talk about a timeline after that.
We'll have to discuss it all and come to you with our plan as refined as possible so that you have something to work with. So it may not be by the next meeting or the next meeting after that, but the more we can refine it, the easier we can make it for you guys.
Yeah, and I work with Vince a lot on some of these ideas in the past. Yeah, just pick a couple of topics, and within those topics, we scale down and we start from there. But we're here to help you, and we think that it's a very interesting topic, so we'll do it happily.
Awesome. Thank you, Florencia.
Sure.
Are there committee members? Sarah Boyce?
Thanks, Pete. Thank you, Florencia, so much for telling us what a lot of the options are and sort of how you guys operate. Because I think it's really helpful to have that little bit of knowledge as we go into the more planning phase for the outreach. But I just had a few questions specifically about the social media piece. So I know the town has social media. Would excuse me, would we be able to do something like would it be just through the town's stuff, or would it be like we should have our own coastal resiliency, like Instagram or something? I'm just curious, as we make a plan, what has worked with other committees in the past?
So there are no other committees that have social media presence. We certainly advise against it. First, because boards and commissions change members. So if you have a member that is very into social media and does a great job, perfect. If that member leaves, then you will not have any more content and it will fall through. Second, any social media account that is town owned has to have a Town of Nantucket email. And that is in case it gets hacked, for example. We'll need to have access to it. So it will basically need to be managed by a town employee. Leah already had, the Natural Resources has social media. So I would say, I think right now, there is still a lot that has to happen before maybe we come up with such a strong content that you will have content to share in social media. If for any reason we see a need in the future, we can discuss it. I don't think that should be your priority right now. Keeping up with social media, content for social media, in the past maybe it wasn't, but right now it's the one person's job if you want it to be successful. We don't even have that in the town right now, so we're all the time, trying to keep up with it. But yes, I would advise, don't think that having an Instagram account is the priority right now. And there is a social media policy. There are other things that we will need to.
Yeah, I think it's important for everyone to know that ahead of time too, because I think we've talked about communications in the past and it gets tossed around, but then it's like exactly like you're saying, it's no one's job. No one wants to keep up with it. So I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Florencia. Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, to go off the social media thing, if there's any topics or specific material that you want to be posted through the Natural Resources, you can send it to me and I'll read it over and then see if it's, if we should post it. Also, monthly, there's the town newsletter. And so Florencia and Haley and I spoke a couple weeks ago, and I send stuff for that, content to be put in that newsletter. And then we had talked about potentially, it may be a good idea to have a coastal resilience newsletter that goes out, every couple months or something like that. And then we can generate email addresses that gets sent to. It could maybe get sent to other organizations like the yacht clubs. I think they have newsletters. And so it could be linked to those newsletters as well. And that could be a great avenue to get the word out to people that are not on social media. So that's something that we could also work on as a group as well.
Yes, sorry. Okay.
Hold
I
on.
just wanted to add, sorry, yes, I did forget about the e-news and mentioning that. That's an option. And I think that, again, in the past, we've talked about it with Vince and Leah, that it could be a good opportunity for you to start building an email list of interested parties. And if you have contacts right now, please share them with us. We do have a list of coastal resilience partners that we are always emailing whenever there is a forum or anything that might be interesting to them. So hopefully you're all in that list. But if you have a list of contacts you want to start sharing with us, we can start creating that. And then in the future, yes, when we have solid content, we can start talking about maybe, I don't know if a monthly newsletter, but every other month, a quarterly newsletter just dedicated to coastal resilience or community resilience. Yeah. That's another thing that we can do. So hopefully you're all subscribed to the town newsletter, by the way, that comes at the end of the month. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Florencia. Haley, you got something to say?
Yeah, just really briefly, to your point of getting things prepared for us. The other thing I wanted to just mention was to think about your audience. So who is it that you really want to see this message? Is it a certain age group? Is it homeowners? Is it everyone? I mean, obviously it's relevant to everyone who lives here, but thinking about who your audience is will be really useful for us in order to target them. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right, great. I think we'll be able to take, I'll take public comment for this item, and then the next item, we can probably roll public comment from the board into that one and this one, since they're similar. So is there any public comment on what we just talked about? Okay, good. Haley and Florencia, can you hang out a little bit for the next item? Okay, great. So we're gonna have a presentation on a draft crack communication plan that Doug worked up all on his own since the last meeting. He says it'll be about 15 minutes long, and I'm gonna hold him to that because, we don't have a lot of time. And as we learned from the last meeting, we can certainly go on. So Doug, why don't you go ahead?
Peter, I'm just going to jump in 1 second. There's a bullet under number 5 that says develop 3 to 5 survey questions to send to homeowner association meeting members. So I'm not sure if you want to do that now or after Doug's presentation, but just wanted to note that.
Let's do it after. So go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Peter. I'm trying to get my share screen function to work here. Hang on 1 second. Sorry. And I'm hoping this works. Later. Sorry, I'm a rookie on sharing, and I don't want to quit. So let me just, Lee, I may have to ask you to be my babysitter on this presentation,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen. But if you want, I can bring your presentation up and share it online. And then
It's probably best for you to do it because right now it's asking me to shut down and reboot, and I don't want to do any of that stuff.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you. Thanks everybody, and thanks also to Florencia and Haley. I think everything you've said, I was nodding aggressively to. It all made great sense to me. Just so you understand kind of where I was coming from, I maybe foolishly volunteered to try to begin a conversation with the committee about what are the messages that we think we need to lean into. You know, where should we be focusing in terms of target audience? You know, we really have only scratched the surface as a committee on this. So my thought here was just, let's see if we can kind of put together a presentation that offers people a way to kind of think about the building blocks of an education and outreach plan. And then let's have a conversation about it. So nothing that you're going to see in here is decided. It was me sitting at a laptop going, well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. And I'm hoping that after I'm done talking in, let's say, 15 minutes, Peter, that maybe we could segue into a conversation and get some clarity around that. I don't imagine we'll get 100% locked in on anything today, but maybe it's a way to get the conversation started. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay, so Leah, why don't you go ahead and hit the slide, the next slide.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you're not seeing the presenter view. Is that correct?
I'm seeing full screen.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this slide here is intended to kind of lay out three basic building blocks of an education and outreach plan. And I should mention there's a fourth that I failed to include in here that Florencia just mentioned, or Haley just mentioned, which is audience. It's like, who do you want to affect? So let's keep that in mind as we talk about what the potential messages are that we think are most important to get through. I'll start by saying, I think there's a general feeling within the committee, or maybe a little bit of an angst within the committee, that not a lot of people really understand what coastal resilience is all about. They have relatively low awareness of a thing called a CRP. If you asked 100 Nantucketers, what does CRP mean? You'd probably get a lot of blank stares. So I think we're starting at the most basic level of understanding and saying, you know, why is this an important thing for me to worry about, either as a homeowner, as a business owner, as a voter, because I think eventually there's going to come a time when many of these coastal resilience projects that we have been working on and are part of the plan are going to ask voters to pay for in some way, shape, or form. Not all of this is going to come through grants, certainly. So there are going to be financial implications for the town and for voters. So all of that is the background. This was just a thought to start with. What's the message that we think we want to lean into? I think Florencia said, you know, when do you want to be talking about certain things? And so we'll talk about that a little bit. Exposure, that big block in the middle, was really more for my own benefit. I start with very little knowledge of what's the relative scale of the Inky versus Current versus the Instagram following for, you know, Westmore Club. So I really just started to, for my own edification, try to put those building blocks together just so I have a sense of what the landscape looks like. And then the last thing that Leah and I have talked about, and I know Florencia, you kindly offered to help with, was maybe we should start with a survey or just get a sense of what people's relative understanding of the whole coastal resilience issue is. So that's the starting point. If you want to go ahead to the next slide. I thought it would be interesting just to start with, what have we been talking about in the last couple of months? And a couple of things just came to mind. One was, you know, speaking of exposure, there was this fabulous article in Magazine featuring Leah and all the work she's been doing to try to advance coastal resilience. And likewise, there was a public forum event in September. You know what, if you could back up, Leah, I think it may be on auto advance or something. Sorry about that. We're still up here. There was the public forum at the Climate Change Summit that was sponsored by Linda Loring, Nature Foundation, and NCF. We've also talked about, you know, job one, we talked about maybe being, let's educate property owners on best practices to make their properties more resilient. In pink, we have the whole discussion around CRDs and betterments and capital funding. And is that our job or not? Can we weigh in on that? And then another topic that came up for the first time, I think, for us in August was the whole discussion around Concom's updating of their wetland regulations. So these are just like 4 examples of things we've talked about. I don't know that these are priority 1, 2, 3, 4, but they might be. So let's start out with that. If you want to advance, this just connects the dots to say all of these issues rightly come from the CRP. The whole discussion of general awareness really comes out of the executive summary. How many of the general public have actually read the CRP? I would wager that a tiny handful of people on the island have actually read 286 slides, okay? And as Leah and I have discussed, I think it's almost physically impossible to read them in their current format. So, you know, what should we expect? Have they even read the executive summary? The executive summary is 26 slides. So that's more than a ham sandwich. That's a long commitment of time just to get acquainted. What can we do? This would be my question. What can we do as a committee to make it easier to understand what the CRP is about? So that's one. If you want to flip to the next page. Picking two that were very topical from the last 2 months, the N Magazine thing that featured Leah and was so well done, was awesome. But how many people actually saw that? I don't know. So I tried to find out. The other one that I attended personally that I thought was so impressive was a much smaller by scale event, but potentially as powerful, which was that event at the Great Harbor Yacht Club where Sarah and Jen and Rachel all presented, really compelling presentation. And so we had 130 people show up. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I was really blown away by how many people were showing such interest. And to, I think, Sarah's point at her previous meeting, what was also encouraging was the number of new faces that were in that crowd. So I just set those up and asking the question, how big are these two things in the relative scale, right? So next slide. This is, again, my sort of homework trying to lay out, well, there's lots of ways to reach people in Nantucket. There are the town managed platforms that Florencia and Haley oversee. And many of those are very powerful. And I would hope that we could see coastal resilience issues getting more and more exposure over time in all of those media. Independent media, obviously, when people think about reaching people, they typically think of being in a letter to the editor in the Inky. But there's lots of other standard conventional media platforms like Current, like N Magazine, like Nantucket Today, Daybreak. This is just a partial list, and we could keep on going. There's Yesterday's Island, and so on and so forth. Right? There's a third bullet, which is, I think, a very powerful tool for us because it could help us reach new audiences, and that is the aligned nonprofit groups like the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, the Nantucket Land and Water Council, Nantucket Land Bank, and so on and so forth. And this is, again, just a cursory list. You go to community groups. There's the Facebook group called Nantucket Year-Round Community, which is quite large. You've got the things like, and this is Leah's suggestions, why don't we reach out of the usual suspects and try to talk to some of the social clubs like Westmore and Great Harbor and so on. And then at the bottom, you've also got some major players in the nonprofit world that have nothing to do with coastal resilience, but maybe we could create, if we decided to lean into something, could we create some content that would be of interest to those kinds of platforms? So if you segue to the next slide, this is just really quickly mapping a general, very crude, very primitive assessment of scale. And right off the bat, what jumps out at you is the N Magazine and Current sort of dwarfing everybody. Caveat that with the knowledge that is largely driven by very large Instagram followings, many of whom probably are not homeowners, many of whom don't live year round. They're, vacationers or what have you. So are they critical to our target audience? Maybe not. Likewise, there's lots of duplication in there. They share their Instagram files between each other. So there's a ton of duplication. So take those big numbers with a big grain of salt. What you're not seeing a lot of here is, the impact of the grassroots efforts, the live public forums, for instance, that Leah and Vince have been doing for any number of months or more than a year now, where you're reaching out in person and making a direct connection with a homeowner that may know nothing about coastal resilience. I think that can be every bit as powerful as some of the glossier sort of air war media coverage that we've seen in the last couple of months. Okay, so that's just sort of painting the picture. If you just go to the next slide, please, Leah. Thank you. Just taking those two examples that I talked about, the Leah article, which is that first big number in N Magazine, 140,000 impressions, again, largely driven through their Instagram following, but that's a sizable number. And, it just kind of helps me feel good that it's not like the coastal resilience issue has been hidden. I think it's gotten exposure in any number of other ways. What's not captured in this flowchart, and because I said this is only those that I'm aware of, there's endless numbers of coastal resilience related content, stories that are happening in other aligned social media groups, as an example, like the Land Bank, I'm sure has had a number of postings about this. So I think collectively, it's getting a lot of exposure, maybe more than we appreciate. How much is crack directly driving, I think, is a good and open question. I don't have a good answer for it yet. So on to the next slide. So Lee and I had a couple of email exchanges. We were thinking, well, what are the other things that we might help the audience understand? And, one of them is, gee, should we be developing some kind of a coastal resilience newsletter? I have to be honest in expressing some questions in my own mind about the validity of this idea, to the same degree, perhaps, that Florencia was speaking about social media, which is a newsletter is a big job. And it doesn't just happen automatically. It's going to require a lot of focused effort, and you got to keep working on it and creating new content to fuel it. And oh, by the way, if you only have 15 email newsletter followers, is it worth it? To me, the bigger opportunity is creating content that it becomes effectively viral within Nantucket, so that it's not contingent on someone saying, yes, I want to hear every month or every quarter from CRAC, when the reality is very few people on Nantucket probably even know what CRAC stands for, right? So let's just be cautious that that could be a really good idea. I would argue perhaps the best thing to do there would be, let's build to that. Let's get to a point where we feel like we've got enough content assembled and we've got a way to support it on an ongoing basis. So it's not just a one and done. It's going to be something that happens over time. Okay, next slide. This was just an idea I throw out there. I'm not sure it's a good idea, bad idea, whatever. I just think this is a story that would impress people. It's kind of borrowing from the update that Leah gave us last meeting. Just open people's eyes to what's in the CRP and the progress that's being made sort of behind the scenes. And let's bring it out from behind the scenes. And let's distribute this as far and wide as we can, whether it's in person or it's linking it to our allies, social posts, what have you. I just feel like it would be useful to have some kind of a nicely digested, contained recap of all the good news that Leah shared with us last month. And the last one, this is already in progress. I don't know if you can't probably see my screen very well, but I stopped by the NRD offices last week while I was still on the island, and Leah shared a bunch of the material that she shares. And this one piece is really terrific. It's very simple and easy to digest. It's a one-pager. Okay, great. Maybe we don't need any more than this. I do think long-term we might consider embellishing that, somehow designing it in a more kind of comprehensive fashion. But again, that's just an idea that comes from some of the other topics we've been talking about. Next slide. These are two, I think, that come right off of our discussion that Peter teed this meeting up, which is, what is our charge? What are we allowed to speak about? What do we want to speak about proactively to the community beyond the select board, right? And two that have been very topical. One is, do we get involved in advocating for coastal resilience projects with Capcom and FinCom? Well, if we do, and we know that ultimately that would require a vote at the town meeting, well, then we would be wise to get out there and start educating people why this becomes a priority for the town, right? So that's just a placeholder. I don't know, is that January, February, March? Sometime before a big town meeting article is all I'm suggesting. And then the last one, the one that we just recently spoke about again, was the wetlands regs update. And when Concom is ready for prime time and ready to promote its change recommendations, I do think it would be wise for Concom to take a good look at those. And if we feel so inclined, I think that it would be really helpful for us to add our voices to that discussion. I think the last slide. The last slide was, again, just going back to, do we want to do some kind of awareness survey? And ideally make it sort of a regular thing. Maybe it's biannual. So we can get a sense, are we making progress? Is any of this helping? Or are we just whistling to ourselves? So I know that was a lot. I don't know if I did it in 15 minutes because I wasn't paying attention, but that's pretty much where I wanted to get. These were just some last thoughts. I guess the question for the committee to think about, does this help kind of begin the conversation? Is that too much? Not enough? Things that are missing, ideas that we haven't mentioned here that maybe we should be thinking about more. The new messaging tools. Do we need a newsletter? Do we want to do an annual report? Do we want to embellish the current property owner's manual? There could be 1,000 other things that we want to talk about as a committee. And then I guess the issues may be the most critical. What are we going to weigh in on as a committee? And I think the survey is kind of a no-brainer. So thank you, Peter. I think that's all I had.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. I will take public comments from committee members. Sarah Boyce, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Doug, so much. This was such a nice way to really organize thoughts and spell things out. I really appreciate putting numbers and data to the kind of types of communication and outreach. I think one thing that comes to mind right away, kind of dovetails with what you had in the very beginning about the different organizations and kind of working with different communication partners, is that because we are a volunteer committee, in the sense of we are volunteers, we don't want to make too much work, right, for ourselves outside of other obligations of the committee. So I would say, we don't have to be everything to all people. So taking a step back even further of like, what is our mission? What is our communication goal? And I think a good place to start would be to think about what products do we have that we already have, like that the data is already there, the information is already there, and how can we reinterpret it for communication purposes. So in thinking about that, we have, before we get too far ahead of ourselves of next steps, we have so much that's in the Coastal Resiliency Plan. And to your point about how long it is, and even the executive summary is long, because it's comprehensive, because it needed to be. So one of my suggestions would be, through whatever means possible, or we can decide what the communication avenues are best, but to take aspects of the Coastal Resiliency Plan, maybe chunks of it or certain parts of it, and that can be different focus for different periods of time. Sometimes that might tee up to some of the projects that we want to push forward that we might need a vote at some point. But so for example, I talk a lot because of where my job is, out by Madaket Road in the West End and things like that. And I pull from the CRP all the time because the maps are already there, the data is already there, the recommendations are already there. And then that dovetails into maybe specific projects. So just we individually might not want to, reinvent the wheel. So taking the products that we already have and kind of pushing those out in chunks. The other thing I was gonna say, I definitely love the survey idea, and I think an annual report is maybe easier at this stage than a newsletter, because of the fact that a newsletter makes us have to do something at regular intervals, whereas an annual report, we sort of do that anyway, but it's good. And then the other thing the last thing, I'm sorry to occupy a lot of time. But if many people may have seen the letter to the editor that was in the Current, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, by someone who was talking about the water temperature of the harbor and was like, is anyone talking about this? I haven't heard anyone talk about water temperatures at all. And I was kind of thinking, with all of our different groups, the town, all the different nonprofits, all the work the Natural Resources Department is doing in this field, it's always surprising to me that someone that does care hasn't heard about this information yet. So I think that there's, in addition to the projects and the things that are moving forward, I think real basic communication about things that are being done would be helpful. I mean, it was kind of an eye-opener to me that I feel like so much is being done in this realm, but I think there's still avenues to go with some of that basic information. So that's, I think if we overcomplicate any one message, it's too much. If we talk about all aspects of the plan all the time, then it's too much. So if we piece it out. All right, thanks. Sorry, that was a lot.
Thanks, Sarah. Who else has a comment? Okay, Jen?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'm unmuted, sorry. Doug, this is great. Thank you for pulling this together and putting all this time and thought into it. I think we've all thought in different ways about how to be effective. And I agree that we kind of have this feeling that one of the ways that we can be effective as a committee is helping the public really understand what it is that's going on with coastal resilience on island. And the questions I get a lot, and Sarah and I do a lot of teaching about climate change and impacts of climate change, is what is actually being done. People aren't seeing the responses, and I think that the town does have a lot of actions that are happening, and individual groups have a lot of actions that are happening, and there are ways for people to have a voice, and they just don't know. They are not plugged into the right information channels, or they're not finding it in their newsletters in the right way. I think that through all of this, and just echoing what Sarah said, we're all volunteers, so there's only so much we can do. I think a productive conversation for us as a committee would be, okay, what are the, for the rest of this year, and then again into next year, what are the top 2 topics we want people to learn about in the next 6 months? And we all probably have different ideas about what that is, but I think as a committee coming together on what those, identify the next, topics for the next 6 months, and then, what is key for the public to know, for 2024, and that might hinge on, the grants the town's trying to go after, or projects we're trying to do, or things we want, activities we want people to do. But I think that might be a good way for us to start this conversation, so we can give good direction to the town, and to feed into what Florencia and Haley were telling us, that, the resources the town has. It's identifying those topics maybe first.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen. Anyone else? Any committee members? Okay, well, okay, go ahead, Gary.
Well, just a couple of comments. First of all, Doug, that was great that you put that entire production together. That was really helpful, thinking it through. And one little issue there is where you mentioned about an annual report. As you know, we are required, and we do produce, every committee, including ours, has to produce an annual report. Whether or not the annual report that we produce at the end of each fiscal year is what we want to give to the general public versus satisfying our obligation to the town is something we ought to look at. But we do, in fact, have the annual report, and we do have to do that every year. One question that came to mind while we're talking about this, and it was, I was reminded about it by RJ's comment at the beginning of the meeting. The CRP does say that we should push for updated regulations, and the Conservation Commission is in the process of doing that. And so thinking about something that Peter said before, he was talking about whether we are looked upon as passive, or whether we are much more than passive, much more active. I personally am in favor of being much more active. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that means to me is that when the Conservation Commission came out with its proposal and was starting to have hearings, instead of doing what we are doing, which is waiting to see what everybody else is saying, I would have said, we really are in support of these regulations that increase the buffer zone, that limit the amount of pools in some of these flood areas, even though it wasn't the final proposal, because it might have helped the thinking of the committee as to what changes they are thinking to make with the first proposal that they have put forward. So right now, they don't have any comment from us. So they're listening to the real estate construction people who want to make sure that no one can stop them building right to the water's edge everywhere. And I kind of feel that it's a shame, because my personal view would be that this is part of what we talked about in the CRP. And I'm thrilled that the Conservation Commission is moving forward on that, but they don't have our view that what they had proposed is a good thing. And I hate to think that we're going to wait till the very end until it's all done and then say a yay or a nay, and that's our only role there. That's my comments.
Okay, Gary, right on that, what you just said, we're not waiting till the very end. We're gonna get from Jeff right away what they've refined it to, and we're gonna do a letter very soon. And I don't think that we were ready to do a letter when we got the information originally, so but I agree with you, proactive as a committee is what we should be, is what I think we are, to the best of our abilities.
Great.
So, does anyone have any comment? All right, I want to say, thanks again, Doug, for doing this. It took a lot of work, a lot of forethought on your part, just by taking it and running with it. And I think it's a jumping off place for us, for discussions on what we're going to hand to Florencia and Haley. Gets us thinking about it. Surely this will be an agenda item on the next meeting. Surely we'll think more about it ourselves outside of this meeting between now and then. And hopefully we can start on refining and coming up with a plan that we can then hand to Haley and Florencia. Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I wasn't gonna hop in on this one, but I was gonna say, because I definitely don't disagree that I think sending a letter is great, but one of the whole purposes of having a member of the Conservation Commission as a seated member on CRAC is to be that conduit of information from CRAC back to the Concom and vice versa, right? Like the end of every one of our meetings, we always have committee reports and things that come up. And when we have those agenda items, you know, that the purpose of that person is to also share that information back and forth. And I think putting a letter on record is always good because it provides, you know, kind of written backup that's there. But hopefully, you know, the members to the boards that are representing on CRAC are bringing that information back and forwards to their boards and showing support through that means too, right? I don't want that to be lost in the shuffle where we're sending stuff in, we're doing that, but really those representatives should be given either permission through the other board that they're sitting on to provide the information back and forth. So I think that's important to make sure that those interests are being kept up as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Doug, you have something else to add?
I do. I just wanted to put a bow on this discussion by circling back to something that Jen mentioned, which is, you know, maybe we should all be having this homework in our heads to name the top 2 topics that we want to focus on for the next 6 months. My question is, what's the best practical way to get that done? Do we give people a list of here's 6, pick 2, rank them in order? You know, do we give them some kind of specific assignment? Because my fear is oftentimes, I mean, we're all busy. Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And we come back in 2 weeks from now, we really haven't thought a lot about that specific question, and now we're being asked to vote. So I would just throw that out to maybe Peter and Leah to think about.
All right, thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any more raised hands. I guess Leah and I will brainstorm some topics to send out to you all between now and the next meeting. And then hopefully we won't pass it off again, and hopefully we'll all do our homework and pick the ones that are most important for us. So what are we on to now? Well, before I get down to the bullet item, is there any public comment on this item, on number 5?
I don't have a comment. I just wanted to thank you all, especially Doug. You did an amazing job, and it's a great start. I think that you're very lucky to have him in the team. So yeah, I feel very excited about what's to come, and just let us know. We are here, and we're here to help you. And I agree that the homeowners for sure definitely needs an update. I'll be happy to take on that. I did it, I don't know, 2018. QR codes, not that popular back then, very popular right now. So we can definitely bring it up to 2023, 2024. So we will leave now because we need to jump to another meeting, but thank you.
All right, thanks, Florencia.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay. The bullet item below, we were gonna develop survey questions to send to homeowner association members so that they can get back to their presidents, and then we can invite them in to tell us what the issues are for each of their neighborhoods. Did anybody think about this? Does anybody have any survey question ideas? Sarah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't actually have question ideas immediately. More that I'm curious why we're just doing it through homeowners associations. Because lots of people own homes that aren't in a homeowner association or rent homes. I'm just curious where that particular thing came from. Because like I own a home, I'm in a neighborhood, but we don't have an association that reports to the Civic League or anything. So I'm just curious how that contingent was selected.
The idea was that there are 25 area associations, and within those associations there are members. It's just one way of reaching out to the public and trying to get information from them. It doesn't mean that you, the homeowner, isn't going to be reached out to, but it'll be probably through a different way. And so we know that these associations exist and the lists of people exist. And so we wanted to hear from the area association presidents. It was just one way of engaging the public. It wasn't meaning to exclude people that aren't in these associations. But you live in Sachem's Path. You guys have a homeowners association, correct? So maybe another way to go is to go to all the subdivisions, find the homeowners associations, and present them with the same questions, and then their chairman or their presidents can then come and talk to us. So this was just one way. It wasn't meant to be excluding people out. So we don't have to do the questions now. We can make this part of public reach discussions coming up, but I wanted to try and do it. Christy, go ahead.
Yeah, just to Sarah's point, I do think that we should think about, and I know I get your understanding, Peter, and it makes sense, with homeowners associations, you have an active participant, you're going to get feedback, which is a good thing. But I do think we should, along with that, also think in broader terms about further outreach beyond the homeowner associations.
Definitely. Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. We can also, when I was talking to Florence and Haley a couple of weeks ago, and they had mentioned, like Florence had just mentioned, that there can be surveys on the town's website. So this could be an opportunity to put that survey once we develop the questions onto the website too, to reach the broader homeowners. But to Peter's point, this is just one way to start. We needed to pick, one area, one association where we can start the CRP 1-1 project. So this is where we thought, since Peter Morrison had come on and shown, that they're interested in working with CRAC to help develop this and get the surveys out.
Okay, well, maybe we'll make this part of the homework that Leah and I will develop hopefully very quickly in the next couple of days, and then send that out to you guys for the next meeting. Does that sound okay? Yes, Matt?
Yeah, what are we asking questions for? What are we hoping to gain? Why are we asking? Like it's sort of, it's one thing to say, hey, we want to do a survey, people will respond, but what is it we're hoping to get from it?
So what we were hoping to get from it was that these would be questions that we would give to the area association presidents, and they would send those to their members. The members would get back to them and say, I live in Smiths Point. I live in the Smiths Point neighborhood. I'm concerned about these things. Then we had talked about at the last meeting about people, those area association presidents, one by one, maybe two at a time for the meetings, telling us the results of the survey. Tell us what your residents are concerned about in relation to sea level rise, in relation to CRP. So it was a way for us to reach out to. It was all part of public outreach. It was a way for us to listen to the public on what their issues are now that they know about the plan. What do they think about what's happening in their neighborhood? So it was sort of us aiding the area association presidents doing the work for them, basically saying, here are the questions we want you to ask them. Collect that information and then come and talk to us about it. Does that answer your question?
Sort of not, but Leah's got her hand up.
Okay, but that's what we talked about anyway. Go ahead, Leah.
Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to go off what you were saying. I think the intent too was once we figure out what those associations are, worried about within coastal risks, then from there we can create a roadmap or content or something to be able to give to the homeowners and say, okay, you're worried about erosion. This is what you could potentially do on your property to buy more time. So it would give us information to be able to implement the CRP 1-1 best practices for property owners.
Does that help, Matt?
Sort of. I understand what we're saying. I think it has to be at a certain. I think the questions then have to be at a specific enough level. As are you willing? I think it's sort of. If we just have a general survey, we'll get back general answers, and it's all going to be. I want. You know what it's going to be. We want this and that. Our roads protected. We want this and we want that. And we want everyone to pay for it. We know what we're going to get back. So I think it has to be at the next level down. Maybe it's either it's more general along the lines of have you looked at the best practices for your individual house, etc. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's more, this and this and this is predicted for your area. Would you be willing to? Does this make sense to you? And are you willing to, we envision that you'll be paying for some of this. We envision that you have some responsibilities. Are you willing to, do these make sense to you? I think it almost has to be at a different level. We're past, I think, the general, gee whiz, what's going to happen level. I think we need to find a way to get into the specifics a little bit. That's my concern. I think if we try to bite off too much at a time, we'll get too much information. We'll have a year and a half of meeting with people, but we won't be at the specifics of what we need to do to push, some of the 40 recommendations forward.
I agree. Okay, well, where do we go from here then? Maybe we propose some survey questions and bring them back to you guys for the next meeting. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. All right. All right. So we will have a presentation by Jeff Carlson, a discussion really brief on the town's funding process relative to our last meetings discussion where we got a little off track, and hopefully he clarifies for us what we need to know. Jeff, you want to go ahead?
Sure, I'll try my best. I know town procurement and funding cycles is not the most exciting topic or always the most clear to kind of go through. I know Vince and Leah both kind of approached me at the last meeting and said there seemed to be a little bit of question and to process, and unfortunately I'm the designated survivor in our office that gets to deal with it the most. So really simply, I'll stay focused really just to CRP projects, not to stuff in general. What we did in the development of the CRP, I think, has been really helpful for our funding processes, where we developed scopes for most of the priority 1 through 3 goals for what those projects would look like. And also during that process did kind of a costings estimate on all of those, just to have an idea where we are, because that's how we kind of get into the town funding cycles and kind of the basal information that's needed again to get into those town funding cycles. And then obviously from input from CRAC, from input from the select board, whether it's through their strategic planning process, other select board goals and objectives, other town agencies that have goals and objectives. Some of those have to get kind of refined and looked at through a number of lenses, and then assigned to who's going to shepherd that through the finance process. So the way our finance process in general works is we have developed, and I'm glad Christie is here because he can weigh in on this too if I get too far afield or too deep in the weeds on this. The town has developed their capital improvement plan, and what we try to do is we do kind of a 10-year window on what we estimate for projects that are coming, what we believe their costs are going to be, what year they need to be done and implemented. And then as we move through the yearly funding cycles, that 10-year snapshot is evaluated and reviewed. So I think when we look at the CRP in particular, and we're looking at a lot of these projects that may be scheduled for 2028 or 2030, those are being held in those spots there, but they're developed to a point where they're sitting with information as much as possible. Obviously you don't know a lot of the constraints that are going to be in place in 2032 or 2030, or what the regulatory environment is going to be. So you have this estimate, and then one of the things that happens is as you review that, when you get to the projects current to the fiscal year, you provide a greater level of detail. You essentially provide a detailed scope. You provide relevant project examples, other plans or initiatives that led to it coming up in the funding cycle, and then it goes into the capital committee process. It's reviewed, and then ultimately, should it make it through that process, gets the town meeting and gets voted on, and then in some cases for capital has to end up at the ballot box to go through as well. That's kind of the life cycle of an individual project. If it's an operational expense and not a capital expense, it goes through that very similar process, but through the finance committee. Finance committee doesn't necessarily do as much of a 10-year look ahead as the capital process. Capital's 10-year process. Christie, what would you say? We've really focused on that probably in about the last 3 to 4 years. That's really started to come into play more.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, hard to hold people to the fire with, that far of an outlook out, but we're just trying to sort of get department heads to think clearer about what their future outlook is. It is something we review with every department head. It's part of our discussion with them and comes up frequently. And we do look back on past expenditures also that are relevant to future requests.
Yeah. And then one of the other things that we do with that, obviously keeping all of these projects and proposals kind of in this, I don't know, I always call it like the skeletal phase, where you have the information and kind of a rough costings and kind of a really rough scope of work. Obviously, one of the things that can change how you're viewing that and viewing it in the capital improvement plan, that's out of our control to some degree, is whether there are, state or federal or other private agency grants that come available. We try to keep a little library of projects that are, like we said, identified in these plans, especially ones that are in multiple plans. The CRP has a pretty significant amount of overlap with the hazard mitigation plan, and a few other projects elsewhere, that if grants do become available, they're evaluated for a number of different purposes kind of internally. One is likelihood of ability to get the grant. Sometimes we just simply don't qualify. Sometimes they're open to other groups and not to municipalities. Sometimes, we had a grant recently that came through where it was focused on municipalities of greater than 250,000 residents, and we just simply don't qualify. So that's there. We also review it internally for, kind of staff bandwidth, whether it's managed through natural resources or public works or plus or wherever. If we apply to grants, we obviously need someone to manage and shepherd that grant. I think anyone that's managed one, I feel like there's a few of us on the call, they always take more time than you think, whether it's just setup and getting all of the contracts in place, doing whatever the reporting cycle is back on the grant, any other project updates, things that are there. I always feel like grants take longer than you think you're going to do just to administer the grant. And you obviously have to have someone that's dedicated time to do that. So we evaluate for that. we also, I think, tend to push the envelope a little bit, at least at Natural Resources. I'll only speak for us. We would rather apply and sort that out if we think we're close and get told yes or no and just see where it is, because I think there's always valuable feedback that's provided, even in no's, to say what could have been better, what were we missing, what are your agency goals that we could have better addressed for you. Always a good learning curve from being told no on grants, and then hopefully you can get more than you don't get. But those are all the kind of steps that we take. So those are kind of the three avenues that we look at for procurement. Obviously, the only other one that comes up from time to time, we don't see it as much for large scale projects like we're talking about for the CRP. But occasionally we do get, private gifts and donations that are available. We always also look for in areas where we have overlap, not a CRP project, but a project we're working on for the potential to dredge my Comet Pond is one that the town partner with the land bank as the primary landowner around that pond to collaborate on and to work on and share some of the costs. So we look for those opportunities to obviously try to offset costs to the town as much as possible too, especially for some of the larger scale projects that can get kind of pricey. Always nice to share the load a little bit. But I'm also happy to take any questions. I definitely encourage, if people want to see, sometimes the Capcom and the FinCom are very good about doing their meetings kind of a department at a time this time of year, where we're looking at budget proposals. And even just watching one of them, it doesn't necessarily have to be Natural Resources, can be really insightful in how they do those reviews. I think that both those committees really take their time and weigh out their choices and require a lot of information and really do their due diligence and do a great job. But I also know that a lot of times, especially as we're moving into coastal resiliency programming, where these projects are going to be in the tens of millions of dollars in some cases and more, that I definitely think something that, like I said earlier with the CONCOM, clear directives towards, the representative from Capcom or the representative of FinCom or someone that's on the board, that CRAC is supportive of those projects and their funding requests, I think is always helpful in putting that forward. And then obviously, I was really happy to hear earlier I mentioned that leading up to town meeting, I think if we're going to be putting forward a project where just made up project, it's not a made up project, but made up numbers, if you're talking about something like we're going to be redoing the bridge at Folgers Marsh, and we've partnered up, it's a great project, right? Partnered up with Conservation Foundation, some of the private landowners, Egan Maritime that's there, and to raise that roadway and redo that project is going to be $25 million to do. It's always nice to get a lot of good public outreach out front to say, this is why we're having to spend the money. This is why it's so expensive. This is what's going on. These are the things that were looked at, and getting that through. We all have kind of our area of reach and different expanses, that the more chances we have to get that messaging out there, I think is always appreciated and really valuable. So I think that's another good avenue and kind of the procurement vein for the committee to provide some input and support.
Okay, Jeff,
I'll stop talking now.
Okay. I think at the last meeting, we were a little confused, at least I was, as to, our role in terms of advising. And we were, looking to seek, I think we were arriving at that, we need to be informed so we can then advise to create our advisories. So then how did we go about that? So are we to give our advisories to the select board, and the select board pass that to the Capcom and the FinCom, or do we give our advisories directly to those entities? And we get all hot about we want a grant writer. We want a grant writer to take the load off of Leah and Vince. We want, and so how do we get into that cycle of getting that, and who do we advise for that? And I just want to clear that up so we don't waste a lot of time talking about that, and we know what we got to do. I mean, I know I read the mission, but it's not very specific in terms of that issue. So if you could just, in brief.
Yeah, I think if it's helpful just to kind of touch on the grant writer. Grant writer is something that, a position like that, something the town has been talking about for a long time. I think one of the difficulties in just a general grant writer position for the town, well, I think again, super useful in some aspects of it, is the town is applying for an incredible diversity of grants across a lot of programs. Sometimes there's definitely a lot of grant specific or topic area specificity that's needed. I think having a general grant writer for someone to help with formatting and review and presentation would be incredibly useful. You're always going to need some sort of subject matter expert to come in and provide content for that person to do. And then it turns into a grant management issue for something that's there. So I think the town has heard. I know it's something that town administration has talked about pretty substantially about creating a grant writing position and what that would look like and how that funding source goes. I know there's a lot of different models for how that position's put together. So that's definitely on the table for sure. I think as far as advising back to those boards, again, I think I lean on my earlier comment a little bit. I think as far as projects that are in the queue and developed, the CRP was developed and kind of prioritized things and attached years to things through that public process. I think as they come up in funding cycles, obviously there's some review, but I think the intent of, having Mr. Kickham here on the meetings is to be a direct conduit of the discussion that's had at CRAC back to the committee that he's here representing, and to go forward. And I like I said, putting something on the written record is never bad. But again, I think if the board says we're unanimously supportive of this project and we think it's good and we're going to work on an outreach plan and help to put that out there, I think Christie can go back to Capcom and say CRAC is 100% by this project, or they're supportive of the project too, right? And I think that's part of the role of doing that. As much as, if the Concom representatives here, when that project comes in for permitting, to say, hey, this project was discussed at CRAC and they are supportive of this project and hope that it can gain approval, right? Like, I think all of those conduits for information are in place. So hopefully we can do that. If it's something as a one-off, I definitely think comments are super appropriate. But again, I think that those can come along the way. And I think public support is almost more valuable than committee support if those projects are moving through that process, that getting the word out that these projects are coming would almost be more valuable.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. Another way for giving recommendations is at the quarterly reports that we give to the select board about CRAC. The last slide is always CRAC recommendations. So throughout these meetings, if there's recommendations that are voiced, and that's put into the slideshow. So and then obviously presented at the select board meetings. So that is another way to be able to offer recommendations as well.
Thanks, Leah. Jen?
Thanks, Peter, and Jeff, thanks for that summary. It definitely makes it clearer how the process is working. I'm wondering, you mentioned two different things that you have the idea of what's going into the capital plan, and as far as the next 10 years projects that are going in there, I wonder if it's possible for CRAC to know what that prioritization looks like for CRP related projects. What are the CRP related projects that are in the capital plan, and what is the timing on that? Because I think, to Leah's point, as far as where we give recommendations, I think that's great, but I think we need to make sure we're not giving recommendations that are counter to how this whole process is working. So if we know what the timing is and what the projects are, then we can put our voice towards recommendations on that. And then you also mentioned that for other projects that you're potentially going after grant funding or for other things that there's rough scope of work for particular projects. That might also be helpful to share what those processes are, because we've seen the breakdown on all of the objectives that are in the CRP, but not necessarily some of that background prioritization that you guys are working on, which just might help us facilitate our recommendation and communication. That's it.
Rachel, well, we'll go to Rachel and then Jeff can answer the ensuing questions from both of you guys.
Thanks, Peter. I think one of the things that I've been wondering about for a while, and it's a little off topic, but not entirely, is the list of priorities for the CRP. Is that reviewed, yearly or every couple of years? Because I can see that these things aren't static, right? Certain projects are going to slide up on that list and certain projects are going to slide down. And what is that process? Because I think that process actually plays, I'm wondering if CRAC is participating in that process, and because that process is the prioritization that we're talking about a little bit, and how that's playing out could have a lot to do with how we make recommendations, I guess. Thank you.
All right, do you want me to give a shot?
Jeff, go ahead. Yeah,
Sure.
go
So
for both Rachel and Jen, then we got to move on.
Yep. So I think really quickly, there definitely is kind of a document that's posted for the capital program committees that have the CRP things that are on there, and I always call it the SIP, the capital improvement plan. So we can definitely get that sent around to folks. I know that's publicly available, so I think that's an easy share. As far as updating the priorities, excuse me again, I think that's also something that is always something that CRAC should be, reviewing and looking at, right? Those goals that are there, it's the plan that you guys help to implement through advising the select board, that if we see something that there's a greater need, and sometimes, public survey goes out and there seems to be a greater need focus here, that I think that there's an ability always in a document like the CRP to have some level of real-time adjustment for what's happening in the real world. I think you have to, especially in a plan that, has action items that go out to 2050, that 2050 somewhere may show up more in 2035, might show up in 2065 somewhere else, So I think always having to do that, but I also think that, soon enough, and I can't believe I'm going to say this already, is, in the next few years, we're going to have to start talking about doing a wholesale update of the CRP anyways, right? Like, plans like this to me shouldn't sit for, obviously more than a decade before you're really starting to take a hard look at it again and see what's going on and what's available. So I think as we move closer to that, that's when you can make the really big changes for goals and priorities. But I definitely think that in the interim, if you guys take in information and feel like there's something that needs to move up the list, I definitely think that's something that can be discussed.
Thanks. Appreciate all your explanations and you attending. Rachel, do you still have a question? You have more to say? Is your hand still up?
Oh, sorry. No, I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Okay. Is there public comment on this topic? All right. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Leah. And thanks for your insight, Christy. We are going to have a reconsideration of the necessity of subcommittees, and Leah is going to kind of preface and explain a little bit what she learned from town council and how I think that, and then I'll talk a little bit and then we'll go from there. So Leah, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so I know that questions had come up in the prior meetings about making subcommittees or having two members of CRAC meet together and work on homework and then be able to present that to the whole committee. So I have gotten some feedback from town admin and town council. And so if it's a subcommittee that's already organized, you guys have already organized the financial strategy subcommittee, you voted on it a couple meetings ago. Two members cannot meet if it's not posted. So that would be a violation of the open meeting law. So because there's already a subcommittee formed, you would have to post the agenda, do the minutes. We ran through all of this before. So you would not be able to meet unless there's a meeting that's posted. If there is no subcommittee then 2 members can meet to deliberate and talk about, you know, if they're trying to seek an understanding of an existing process or something like that, and then be able to bring that to the table to the whole committee. So we would advise to, again, not have subcommittees. We already talked about this. There's a lot of logistics, a lot of ways that you can violate the open meeting law, which then creates a larger problem. So hopefully that's clear. Again, if it's already a subcommittee that is organized, you cannot meet without having that agenda posted and minutes taken and all of that. If there is no subcommittee, you can meet together and be able to work on homework.
All right, thanks, Leah. I'll take you in a minute, Matt. I just want to make a bid to disband the subcommittees, and I agree it'd be more work for us outside of the meeting. I would just point to Doug's presentation. He worked that up by himself. He got passionate about it. He brought it to us. It was well received. It's going to push us down the road toward community outreach, and he did that. And no one asked him to do it. Imagine what would happen if we asked each of us to do something on a certain issue. So I don't think we necessarily need the subcommittees after all of this, after thinking about it. And I want to hear what people have to say. I think, yes, you know, 2 people can get together over coffee and talk about something, and we can say, we have an assignment for you guys, and you work independently, but then meet and talk about it, and then you bring it to us, or we give you one person something and they bring it to us, and that's pretty much how we should be operating anyway. That's what I think. So Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, Peter, I was gonna ask, could we disband them and do kind of what you're suggesting? And I guess that's where we should go. It does seem a little passive aggressive to me. If we, what's the difference if I say, hey, Peter and Jen, you're the, I'd like you to go work on communicate. We all like you to go work on communication. Why don't you go work on that? What's the difference between that and having a subcommittee, and then we do the same thing next week? Sometimes I think we're making, the rules, and we're making things sort of, we're making things harder and than they need to be. I don't know. It just seems funny to me. What's the difference? So, but I agree with you. We disband it and do it that way. So.
Well, the difference is we have to post it. If the difference is, if it's going to be a subcommittee, I think it's the phrase subcommittee. If it's going to be that and be official, then the meetings have to be posted and they have to follow the open meeting law. If we're not going to call them subcommittees, then they're just a couple of friends getting together to help us out. And sounds like from Leah, that's what the law is. So we can get around it.
And Peter, I know, but I just, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And I feel, and I think we should be doing it. So we just go ahead and do it the way they're asking us to. But I think it just kind of seems a little
weird,
a little weird, a little passive aggressive to me. But we'll do it.
I agree. How do the rest of you guys feel? So I'll take a motion to disband the 2 subcommittees.
So moved.
Okay, second from somebody?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Gary Beller. Gary Beller, moved by Doug Rose. All those in favor of disbanding the subcommittees and just operating as homework for individuals. Roll call vote. Christy Kickham.
Aye.
Doug Rose.
Aye.
Jen Carberg.
Aye.
Gary Beller.
Aye.
Sarah Boyce.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay, we're done with that stuff. We move on to approval of the minutes from September 5 and then September 12th. So have we all read the minutes? I'm seeing nods. Okay, so for September 5th, I'll take a motion.
Move to approve.
Jen Carberg moves to approval. Take a second.
Second.
Doug Rose seconds. Okay, all is in favor. Christie Kickham.
Abstain.
Okay, Doug Rose,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce.
Abstain.
Okay, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Okay, September 12th. Has everybody read those? And if so, I'll take a motion for approval.
So moved.
Okay, Christie Kickham, so moved. Second from somebody?
Second.
Second from Sarah Boyce. Okay, roll call vote. Christie Kickham.
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Matt Feeman, Matt Fee- sorry, Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Okay. New business committee and natural resources department reports from planning board, conservation commission, harbor and shellfish advisory board, select board, advisory committee of non-voting taxpayers, and other committee members. Do any of us have reports to crack from their respective boards? Okay, we're hoping to get a little storm reporting from Leah Hill over the Hurricane Lee, and if there was any damage or anything we didn't know about.
Yeah,
Is
thanks,
it-
Peter.
That was something that Vince used to do, and I think we appreciated hearing what damages and what CRP related weather events have done.
Yeah, Vince and I went out on that Saturday, and we are part of the Massachusetts Coastal Storm Reporting Committee, it's a very long title for it. But basically, the state contacts us if there is a storm coming that has, projected storm surge or whatnot, and they send out an alert to the specific areas in coastal Massachusetts that those are going to affect. And then we go out and document it using the MyCoast app, which I had given you all a presentation on a couple of meetings ago, and that goes straight to the state. So we take pictures, we write what location it's in, what was impacted, and then that goes into the state database. So luckily, we didn't have any major impacts at all. We went out in the morning, and we have a loop downtown where we drive where there's flooding. We went to the South Shore, we went out to Sconset, and we didn't see any major impacts. The one report that I put in was in Mattakit at the public beach. There was some erosion there, and one of the posts had fallen, but minor. We also, before the storm, went out and did the erosion monitoring project. So we went out to the South Shore areas and took pre-storm measurements, and then Morgan went out and did post-storm measurements, and no major erosion. I will note that at one of the sewer bed locations, that site lost 6 feet during the storm. And that is an ongoing issue with the sewer area, that the erosion rates are extremely high there. So Morgan has actually left the natural resources. She's now working with the trustees. So I'll be taking over that monitoring project from here, on out. There was a significant scallop seed stranding. If you guys are on social media, I'm sure you saw it, or if you read the Current. And so Tara there were a lot of volunteers that came out to help with that. All ages, fishermen, non-fisher people. And I believe the amount that they calculated, they saved 6.5 million bay scallop seed. And that was put into deeper water. So that is significant. They're doing surveys the last 2 weeks. They've been doing surveys around the harbor the annual habitat surveys, and they have, I mean, the amount of seed in the harbor is amazing. There's areas that are covered with seed, and spots in the past where, you know, the dive survey took maybe an hour underwater, they're taking 4 to 5 hours because there's so much seed that they have to collect and then measure after. So it's a good problem to have. Lots of bay scallop seed out in the harbor. And then I'll give some, you know, some more updates as well for the Nearshore Reef project in Sacajah, which is one of the, you know, a piece of one of the CRP recommendations. We have gotten 4 alternative designs for that. And so we're looking at those, you know, internally, and then I'll be able to present to you more about that in the next couple of meetings as well. Hopefully we'll hear back from the CZM grant soon. I would anticipate hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So fingers crossed for that. And again, that was the first phase of the downtown neighborhood flood barrier project, from Strait Wharf to Steamboat Wharf. And it was a 30% design for the preferred alternative. And then there is going to be an update to the hazard mitigation plan, and Vince and Holly Backus are working on that. I believe they're going to be applying for a grant for that. So, you know, I'm sure there'll be some outreach efforts that CRAC can help with as far as getting the word out, and also giving some recommendations to add to that updated plan as well. So that is all I have on the natural resources end.
Awesome. Thanks, Leah. And then I just wanted to know if you guys had any potential sites to visit for our site visits, other places you guys want to go right off. Doug.
Sorry, circling back to Leah, I just had a quick question, Leah, on the hazard mitigation program. I'm not familiar with that. Where do I find that on the website, on the town website?
Yeah, so the plan is, it should be on the town website. I can also email it to you if you just search hazard mitigation plan. There's a lot of overlap between that plan and the CRP.
Does it, I'm sorry, Peter, if I could continue the question. Does that plan address things like power outages and how to recover from those, you know, in a hurricane or that kind of thing?
Somewhat, yes.
A little,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm not hearing any site suggestions, so maybe we'll just come up with a list and then start working through them. Sarah, you have your hand up? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Just throwing off a couple of locations off the top of my head. I do think it would be good homework, but places that we talked about, even in the example Jeff gave with funding, if people aren't familiar, it'd be interesting to see on the ground, like the Folgers Marsh area where the road is. So some of us, like, I know Jen's very familiar with that area. I'm somewhat familiar, but it would be good. I think the benefit for the Sconset trip was to see it and then be on the ground and be able to ask questions of the people that are most knowledgeable about it while you're in the field. So I think the Folgers Marsh area would be good, and any other areas that are coming up as high priority that we want to push funding out for, potentially. And then the other one, I don't know if this would be a good one that people would want, so take this with a grain of salt, but with the Stilt House Millie's Bridge area. So I've visited that a bunch of times with Jen. We've done field trips there with our classes, but I think it's a good example of where change has happened. So that might be an interesting one, but I don't know if that's necessarily would be helpful to CRAC. But I think thinking of the ones that are really important for us to have like really solid knowledge of before we push funding for it. And I think right now it sounds like the Folgers Marsh is one that would be coming at some point down.
So maybe we could do 2 at once. And we would, I mean, what do you guys think? Do it in between meetings, So it'll be a field trip in between meetings. So if the next meeting is October 10th, potentially if depending on who could make it, we would go and see both those places. Does that sound like it might work for you guys? Not for, you'll be in Maine, won't you?
I think I didn't realize this was like we're talking about next week. I'm thinking
Oh.
like at some point you said between the next meeting being I'm
No.
thinking like
No,
sometime this winter.
No. What I was using that by way of example. So let's say between now and the next meeting, and that could mean the winter, but I'm just saying October 10th is the next meeting. So what do you think? But I didn't say that would definitely happen. I was just throwing it out there as an example, that we would not turn this into one of our meetings, but it would be, we'd have a meeting and then go do it, and then we'd have another meeting. So hopefully it would fall in between that, and we wouldn't waste a whole meeting on it. It would be outside of our meeting schedule. So make it work for everybody. So not coming up right away, just using it as an example. So. Okay, not hearing anything from you guys. Okay. Discussion of upcoming meeting dates and topics. The next meeting is October 10th, 2023 on Zoom. Hope we can all make it. If nobody has anything else, 8 minutes to go. That's awesome. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So
Second.
moved. Rose, I'll take a second from somebody.
Second.
Second from Matt Fee. Okay, all those in favor? Doug Rose,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
I
Christy Kickham,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for going on this ride with me.